Good. First up, approve the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as posted. I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Wait, discussion.
Discussion.
The only thing I'd like to point out is hopefully in the future, there are no more hiccups, and I'd like to personally apologize that it says participation in person only. I think we need to get that right. I think it's very important that these are going to be broadcast on YouTube and we can amend it. We can, that's why we're having discussion. If there's something you're saying, tweak that, because it states, and I get it was a town hall holiday, so I'm not sure if that's the reason they couldn't correct it online. But this is
Could be.
what it states, and we should correct that. So that's a good point, Dr. Brigg. So it is.
So you're looking to make sure that we always have.
Yeah, that was my first point, but Dr. Berger brought up a good thing. We should amend this agenda to state it is broadcast on YouTube, and what's the other one there? So there you go. Good. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
So we should put that on this as amended. It is on, so then when we go back through the record, it shows that it's there.
You just brought up, right?
Yes. Yep. He's there.
All those are,
So
Favor with that change.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
as all those in favor of the agenda as amended.
aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approval of the minutes from 2/20/25. 1/20/1/2/25. Sorry, a little nervous.
Fine. I'll make that motion. Second motion.
Any discussion on that? Questions? Errors, anything? Issues? You have a second? on it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Darcy.
Darcy.
Sorry.
I didn't even hear her. Can you hear me or no?
Yes.
Okay.
Even with speaker right next.
Okay. All those are in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
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 So moved. Public comment? Which we'd like to try to limit to 3 minutes, if we could, per person. Okay, is there any public comment? Please state your name and address.
Tim Lavoy, 15 Chatham Howell Road. Just two things. One is I hope you guys are gonna get it right with whether it's on Zoom or not on Zoom. Because I literally checked before I left home and saw that the agenda still said it was an in-person meeting only. Yeah, I guess it's on Zoom, which is great. And for people to speak up or get closer to the microphones, like a lot of us are hearing challenged. And it's hard. And other than that, thank you very much for the work you guys are doing here.
And congratulations, Tim, on your new position.
Yeah, bravo.
Anybody else? Public comment? Is there
Anyone online?
anybody online that has? Is there anyone on Zoom that has comments? Okay. For the thing, let's go to Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Britton, to brief the committee on the 25-26 capital expense budget for the Board of Education.
Excellent. Let me pass these around. Okay, the letter that I'm giving you now is a transmittal letter that I included to the Board of Education. They start the Tuesday night. So this is something that is going to the Board of Education as part of my budget proposals. Of course, in the operating budget, I always include capital requests. So I thought this would be a great place for us to start our conversation tonight. Understanding that this committee is going to make recommendations to the board and Board of Selectmen, and all of these things are going to have to be discussed over January at our budget workshops and ultimately approved by the Board of Education and Board of Selectmen. And if everything in this letter goes forward as described here, it would ultimately have to be approved at the referendum in May. But I wanted to give you, for lack of a better description, of vision, right? Because what this letter is, it sort of reduces to writing that which originally was recommended by the Facility Study Committee was incorporated in the plan that went to the bonding referendum in November about the mega school that articulated a vision for starting to pay for projects that are needed at the secondary school and then reallocating funding towards a new bonding payment if the town had decided to borrow the $35 million for the consolidated pre-K-5 school. So it starts with the following assumption. I assume that the Portland Secondary School is not going to be decommissioned. I think Portland Secondary School is here for a long time, right? And we know at the Portland Secondary School that there are capital improvements that need to be made. We know they need to be made because Sightlines told us so. Prior architecture gave us some recommendations on what needs to be done at the secondary school. And Bob and Carl here in their experience working in the building can tell you that capital investments need to be made. So what this letter addresses is a recommendation that any capital investments that are made as part of this year's budget cycle be focused on the secondary school while we go through the process of figuring out what we need to do at the elementary schools and which ones. Right. So this letter says, let's not make any major investments in the elementary schools. Let's do our work as the committee, but let's not forget the secondary school also needs work to be done. And this offers a vision about how to do that with essentially reallocating money that's in the current operating budget and will not impact the mill rate. So let me see if there are any questions. To be clear, that the conversation I'd like to have with you tonight is talking about what needs to happen first at the secondary school and how we can start chipping away at some of those projects without borrowing money.
Just a question, how did these assignments get priority? These were just priorities, but
I prioritized those
Okay.
based on need. Some requirements based on state air quality, and if anybody has any questions on each one, I can kind of go down why, but we have a huge list of capital items, and I think these are the most important to start off with.
And when you say most important to start off about, even though we're discussing the other three facilities, is there anything major at those that just, because no matter what we do, for example, pretend Valley View gets closed, we're still gonna own it. Is there anything major on this list that any of the other three that just cannot wait? That would be the only thing I would say we need to potentially discuss. If there's just, and we need to function for the next year or two. So my question would be before and I'm fine with the premise of what's going on, but I need to get a full handle on, is there something else at one of the other three that just cannot wait?
Either way, all those will have to wait for a bonding referendum because they're in the millions of dollars. So those priorities will certainly come out when we start discussing where we're going to be with which school. And we do have those, but do we need to add to this? This is basically a letter, if you go through it quickly,
Mhm.
based on available funding. Now,
Yep.
nothing above and beyond.
So in your opinion, we can probably make the interim here on the other.
Yeah, I'm hoping we can. I mean,
Okay,
we struggle.
We're not
with
gonna
it.
hold you, something
Yeah.
breaks, something breaks.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. 'Cause
And I
it would
like
be
that if it's going to be something we're going to be doing anyway,
money in a school
It's-
that's not gonna exist.
right, and if we already have the money allocated,
Yeah,
all this makes sense, I'm just asking a few
Yep.
questions, I'm not.
So what I would suggest, let's start at the third paragraph. The first paragraph just identifies some projects that we think make sense. Now, I would also recommend that once we identify how much money we have over the next 3 years without raising the mill, right? Money that's in the current operating budget that we could start to reallocate. I think it's important for this committee to say, yes, let's identify those funds and then engage Fryer and Bob in a discussion about what might be the best way. Are these the best projects to do? Are there other things Fryer might recommend, especially if some of those things they might recommend could be matched up with state reimbursement or other grants or things that are out there. So certainly, we could start with, these are the ones that you see on the top there, the duct cleaning, the air quality improvement, the HVAC upgrades, and the backflow that we might share with Fryer and they might go, yes, those are ones we put in our report. Yes, those are ones you saw on Sightlines and those make the most sense, go in that order. But as part of a 3-year plan, our architects might say, yeah, you know what, here's a different order to do them, or here's a different sequence that might make sense if you applied for grant reimbursement, that you might then leverage more money out of what you're able to put towards certain projects. But if you jump to the paragraph that starts with included, I think I'm just gonna read it, right? Like, let's just go through it, because I know not everybody here has the letter, and I just want people to understand the sort of vision for this. So included with this letter is the debt service table. You see, it's the last one I gave you, right? That's the debt service table that the town is currently paying off now. You will note on the table that the 2024-2025 budget contains an allocation of $456,750 necessary to pay off the bond at the secondary school. You look at the table, look at the last number. That's in this year's budget, reflected in this year's mill rate, $456,000. That's your last payment, Portland, on this building. Congratulations, here's the deed, you own it, right? Here are the choices that the town now has. The town could reallocate the $456,750 to offset operating costs for next year. It's going to be available next year. It's in your budget now. Or it could use that amount to fund capital improvements at the Portland Secondary School. While allocating those funds towards the operating budget will result in an overall lower percentage increase. If you took that 456, put it towards next year's operating budget, it would reduce the percent increase you're going to bring to the town in May for a referendum, right? While it would reduce the overall percent increase, I believe doing so would be the definition of penny wise and pound foolish. Therefore, I strongly recommend maintaining that funding and allocating it towards capital improvement needs at the secondary school during next year, during 25-26. Furthermore, I recommend combining that funding with savings from a potential school consolidation to pay for capital improvements at the secondary schools in the 2026-2027 school year, not next year, the year after, and 2027-2028 school years. And then reallocating that funding to pay for new debt service, assuming we get to a bonding referendum and it prevails in May. Below is a possible scenario that could reduce capital project needs at the secondary school while concurrently planning upgrades at the district's elementary schools. The scenario assumes that the Strategic Planning Committee will recommend consolidation from 3 elementary schools to 2 elementary schools. We haven't decided that yet, but it assumes. And further assumes the town will not reallocate the payment for the final year of the bond in the secondary school. I project the town could save approximately $725,000 in overhead costs from a consolidation. If we reduce from 3 elementary schools to 2, I believe you could take $725,000 out of the Board of Education operating budget. This amount plus the $456,750 amounts to $1,181,750. Below is the scenario I recommend. 2025-2026, next year, starting this July 1. Capital investments in the Portland Secondary School to the tune of $456,750. 2026-2027, that would be a year we'd be shifting kids around. Capital investments at the Portland Secondary School in the amount of $1,181,750. 2027-2028, capital investments in the Portland Secondary School, $1,181,750. Assuming a positive outcome at a May bonding referendum, I project that the town would need to begin paying off the new bond, interest plus principal, in the 2028-2029 fiscal year. That's about the time your debt service would come online for the new bond, assuming a positive referendum in May. At which time, the $1,181,750 could be reallocated to the new debt service. I understand that this plan I outlined requires fiscal discipline and a commitment to maintaining our facilities. However, I believe it is the most cost-effective approach and will place the town on a sustainable path forward. Thoughts?
Initial thought, so what's. How could we keep the money over on the general side? I don't necessarily have a problem with the concept, but as a former Board of Education member of 7 or 8 years, if this money was put over into the Board of Ed's budget, it could be used for anything in the Board of Ed budget at any time according to state statute. What I would like to not, and keep in mind, if there are overruns and you need more money, you're going back to the people. But if this money is to be allocated just for these purposes, I would like to see it stay on the general side in a fund and get used for those purposes because it can never be touched. And then we can actually move forward with actually doing some of the maintenance if we're going down this path. If it gets put over on the Board of Ed side, yeah,
Stays in cap.
correct, but it would have to stay on the town side, not in the Board of Education.
Capital is.
Capital.
Okay, so
Yeah,
that's what I
you're
want to
good
make
there.
sure. It's not gonna go,
Capital
okay,
is to-
that's what I want to make
It's
sure.
reoccurring.
Okay.
Has to stay.
Yeah, so the 456, it's not right now, the
But
money
we
budget
put
is.
doesn't
capital
go
in the Board of
operations.
Ed budget before and it's been used for other purposes. Yes, yeah, we put capital money in previous budgets in the Board of Education budget for certain repairs and it didn't get used. It would then get allocated for other things when you need it.
Capital has a budget that each department has a section that gets funded by the Board of Select. Once that's funded, it's actually listed in categories that you would use, and it's managed by Tom Robinson, Finance Director, as well as the town. So that money really can't be used for anything else. Plus, you can't overexpend its expenditure that's been.
I'm referring to the Board of Ed budget.
Doesn't go there. It stays in capital.
That's,
Under the Board of Education's,
there has been
Second.
capital projects in the past that we put under the Board of not
I
for
mean,
certain,
we've paid.
yes, and they've been in that fund, the Board of Ed, and they've been used for other things in the past. That has happened.
They haven't been pulled out of capital, but money.
Maybe
might
not
have
out of
been
that, no,
put
no, no,
into
not
the
out of the town side
operational
capital.
budget, right?
Maybe I'm not saying it clearly.
Right.
There's been money in Board of Ed side for example, certain improvements.
Yeah, sure.
And the money was not utilized for those improvements.
Oh, yeah. So this would be,
Rightfully so.
this would have to stay in capital.
That's what I'm getting at.
That's it.
That's what I want to make sure.
It's the only way to do that, to move that money to capital so that we can make sure that those funds are used appropriately. Now, that's only a recommendation on how to use them based on the available money. And that's $455,000 with a slight bit of contingency based on the estimates that I can get.
Yep.
But even if that changes, that value can't change. The money is there. We can't add to it. There's a lot about capital that I've learned over many, many years, but that's the safest place to use because you're not driven to spend it within that fiscal year as well.
Yeah, and we're paying down
continues
the
to-
needs that we're going to have.
Yeah, and that's, and Ben, to your point, I'm glad you said that. Because the idea would be, if this committee likes that idea and makes that as a recommendation to the Board of Ed and Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Ed and Board of Selectmen like that idea, and we bring it to the taxpayers and it passes, the idea here would be the high school needs more than 2 million, what is the total I have here? More than the $3 million worth of work. But what we would need beyond the $3 million worth of work is something we might include in the bonding package we bring forward in May,
Yeah, I think that's.
right? But if I said to Mike, and I'm glad you're here, Mike, over the next 3 years, next year, the year after, and the year after, the town is on a path to commit close to $3 million to working on the secondary school. Before the bonding becomes available, or in that time frame, could you help us design and recommend a series of capital improvements on this school, either from the sightlines report or your analysis, matched up with what you, if anything, we could get from state reimbursement that would get us down the road towards the repairs that are needed here?
Absolutely.
And would that help us chip away at what we know are some significant needs at this building?
Yeah, I mean, there was a pretty good list, we
Yeah.
could prioritize it and allocate importance with. What would be important is to take a look at what would potentially be eligible reimbursements and we try to get your back for the dollar as you spend this.
you know, versus, you know, what's gonna fail, and then what is our best bang for the buck. So if we would just have to sit down and talk about what is the priority list. Yeah, that would be a great start.
And would think something like duct cleaning, would that be in maintenance, or is this such a big thing that because of air
It's the
quality?
price. So basically, capital has a, you know, it does, and anything, we've always looked at operational budgets depending on the size of those budgets. That $5,000 threshold would become a capital item. Some of the work, even though it may be more expensive, maybe not fall into capital item. Those items have been requested for years, and we haven't gotten them. So I'm looking at trying to get phase one in to our duct work to be able, because if we start putting in systems that are gonna purify and make our air quality meet standards for the state, we better start there. So if we've been trying to do that for 4 or 5 years and we're not getting there, let's spend some money now to start that program. Where it goes after this, it's only $455,000 here. Where we get involved in, and those items in there, I didn't really feel that there was reimbursement, but where we would start to get involved in the potential of reimbursement for projects is when we have the 1.1 million the following year, if this decides to kind of go through. And then the following year after that. So we'd be looking at some bigger projects with more money available to maybe even get some more bang for our buck with some state aid. But these particular ones right up front were the ones that I felt that we could make a really good impact on before we're even at a situation where we're looking at Prince to even go to bond. Or
So
to
think-
go to bid on
Sorry,
whatever we decide.
Not to cut you off. So things like the ductwork, we're gonna probably try to reutilize when we do upgrade. I just want to get my,
Yeah.
I don't want to be cleaning
so
ductwork that we're gonna.
Without getting into it deeply, the air purification system is going to go into our existing duct, which also is not affected at all when we go to replace our rooftop units to add dehumidification. That's the nicest part about this ionization system. It stays there. Plus, it can be moved.
Now, is it,
So it's a
that
good
brings me to
investment.
my next question, the ionization system, is that considered some sort of reimbursable in any way? Okay. Any of these?
Mike hasn't seen those.
Oh, okay. And honestly, one of them just says HVAC upgrades, so I'm not even sure what that entails, but if it,
That's all.
what I'm getting
rooftops.
at, yeah, what I'm getting at is if there's anything in here that we're entitled to a reimbursement of any number.
Yeah, let me
let's-
answer that
Let's
part.
try to utilize. it.
So Ben,
It's the whole program.
a couple of years ago, we had the opportunities to apply for indoor air quality grants from the state, right? And we would have then. I wish we had, but we just didn't have the money for it. Clearly, we all our hope is that in this legislative session, the General Assembly reopens that and puts those grants back out there again. A lot of these came out of that work, like out of Bob, that was a pass saying. I'll let Bob describe it in more detail. There's a 2-pipe system or a 1-pipe system in here, and it needed to be a 2-pipe system. And when the air conditioning is on in the summer, it's very mildewy and moist in here, and we have to literally run giant industrial sized dehumidifiers throughout the building. Otherwise, there's it's a mess, right?
Yeah.
So what we did is Bob, and to give him a lot of credit, identified these new air handling units that dehumidify the air before pushing it into the building. That and this ionization system would create a purer air in the building, which would be healthier, more enjoyable, and not lead to things like mold or mildew.
Right.
And again, that system, it's not 100% because the entire complex is not managed by rooftop units that we can change over, but it will make a significant difference. And that package was all included. So that was like a $1.2 million package that we were looking to complete with an $800,000 return that we just couldn't get there. And then that grant went away.
But it might come back.
It may come back,
But if it
but we
doesn't,
still have time. I hope. There's your reimbursement on that end.
Mhm.
It was just a grant that they had millions of dollars in, and they just grabbed it again for other purposes.
Mike, do we explain that right from your experience?
Explain it great, yes. So if you are given that grant, it's a competitive grant right now for HVAC, they're kind of, literally, not everyone will eventually get it. That will be reimbursable. What you spend. I wanted to see what the work was.
But you have to have the matching funds.
Correct.
And we
That
haven't
was,
the matching
that was the
funds.
issue, the 200,000 up front.
That is the issue.
200 free.
So but to be clear, the commitment here, in order to do what I describe in this letter, it would be one. This existing $456,000 in the town's budget. Be disciplined. Don't put that towards the operating budget next year, at which time it's gone. And then any new money that you have to raise to pay off a bond, it looks like a giant impact on your millage. Let's be disciplined. And commit that to the secondary school needs. And then, again, the other big assumption here is that this committee gets to a point where you say, we reduce from 2 elementary schools or 3 elementary schools to 2. In which case I project that by reducing a number of positions and the overhead from that reduction, you could generate an additional 725,000. But again, be disciplined. Don't look at that as savings to reduce a future percent increase on a budget, but move it over to capital. And again, it's discipline that we have to say that these funds are there. And if we did that, it would essentially, my argument is take money that's in this year's budget as it becomes available, move it to capital, and then keep it there, be disciplined, and use it to knock off what we know is the work that needs to be done here. As we then move towards a new bonding for the work we need to do in elementary schools, at which time you can take all of it and move it back into a new one of these to pay off the new bond and have zero impact on the mill rate.
Did your 725, what does Oak Hill pay us for rent?
40,000 a classroom.
Okay, so they pay us 80. Did you anticipate the 80 being taken out of your 725 or no? Or I would like to see them stay at Valley View. I'd like to see them, if that's the one that gets decommissioned or whatever, but we can still keep it as a facility in town and keep the rent. So in that 725, you didn't deduct the 80 from Oak Hill at this point.
No, the 725 specifically is a reduction, and I'll just lay it out because I've said it so many times.
No, I know, but we still then, if we do the
Right.
consolidation, we're losing the 80. We can't keep Oak Hill at. If we close one of our elementary schools, we will not physically have the room for Oak Hill.
Depends.
Yeah,
It
It
depends.
depends on what we do with the private.
Right.
Unless you build
Unless you what?
build the space. If you're
Correct.
renovating
No.
schools, you can.
Yeah, I don't think we have the money.
Build space for revenue, but.
Right, I don't believe we have the money to be building an addition for 80,000 in rent. So I think that's not a thing.
I wasn't suggesting building additional space for revenue. I'm saying it depends on what happens with that third facility, right? If the third facility, as you're describing, if the third facility stays a town property and continues to be a property. the
Oh,
town
you're saying-
manages, and
you're
there
saying-
Continues to be space for Oak Hill to rent classrooms.
Absolutely, yeah.
Should the town desire to
direct
do
revenue.
that.
Yes, but those funds, I believe, that would go over to the town side.
correct.
So I just want, when we're creating these numbers for anticipated savings and revenue in the future, and I get nervous when we vote on an exact dollar amount because of variables like that 80. I just want to make sure we're all clear when we give our opinion on what we should do. I have no issue with the funds being put in, cutting down on what we're going to be spending in the future. That's not what I'm getting at. I just want to make sure little details like by closing one facility, yes, we might get 7.25 savings, but there may be other things that we're losing. And I'm not sure if there are any other things are there any other things that we might be losing out there? I mean, you're in a better position than me to know something.
Yeah, the 725, I would just say is also, by the way, in 3 years from now, that 725 will likely be higher because everything goes up.
Yes.
I mean, the 725 in my mind is pretty conservative. It does not factor Oak Hill. It just factors the administrators and other positions
Yeah.
that we could reduce because we won't need 3 principals if we only have 2 schools. We won't need to pay the gas bills and electric bills and heating and upkeep and maintenance for that. It's just straight 725. Now, it could be higher. Could be high. I think it would be higher. I plan to say, my projection on what we could save by consolidating to one school was over $1 million. Right? Like I was prepared to do this with almost $1.5 million on the table to start working. So this is the recommendation out of the facility study committee, which was, don't worry about the high school. consolidate your elementary schools and use the savings from that consolidation to fix the high school. This puts on sort of paper what the original facility study committee identified as when you add schools to your district, you add overhead, which is what happened when you added the middle school. When you reduce schools in your district, you save overhead. You have a choice. When you save that money, you can take that savings one time and go out with a 0% increase in your budget in 1 year. But if you do that and you have to pay more money, it looks like a giant mill increase in the future taxpayers, as opposed to if instead of giving it back and having that savings 1 year, you be disciplined and move it over to capital, then you have it available to do the work, which actually is a smart investment because then you don't have to bond for those projects and pay the interest in the future.
Essential almost $3 million.
Right.
Over that. Thanks. Yeah, no, the concept. I'm okay. I'm just, it's the little piece.
I did study this year for each school, what the potential savings were, even if it was closed to be renovated. Tried to look at what we'd be saving during that period of time of consolidation. So we looked at those numbers and some of those might be included in this, but we have the potential to save those too. You don't want to throw those out right away, but I did go in depth this year in that budget and took a look at each individual school and what percentage I thought in all my line items as far as facilities, because that's really where the money is. As far as, you know, your utilities and not opening the door for students and where you can cut back. And we did take a look at those and there were some pretty good numbers, depending on which facility it was. I looked at them all with attention.
Thank you.
So I think again, I don't think we need a vote on this. I'm just sharing a concept, right? But it's an important concept to at least get some understanding of, because if you embrace this concept and your ultimate recommendations that come out of this committee to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education are to do this, right? You've reduced the amount you have to borrow and you've chipped away then at what is more than almost $3 million worth of work that needs to be done here. And once we do it, then I then turn to Bob and our friends at Fryer Architect and say, we now have a 3-year plan for $3 million worth of work while we go through the potential consolidation, which is the next part of our discussion. Let's get to work on that so we can start chipping away at indoor air quality needs at secondary school and reducing those sightlines and Fryer identified needs going forward. It's a concept.
Can I just ask a question just as a, and does this change how quickly we need to get a proposal for a bonding, or a plan to the selectmen for the referendum? We still have to get that because of matching state money and all that stuff.
So here's what's interesting, and it's a great question. I share this with you, and you're an important voice in this, but at this point in time, the most important voice in this is my Board of Education. I mean, I have to convince my Board of Education to accept the superintendent's proposal, make it the Board of Ed. Right? And the board will be doing that next week at our budget workshops as we unpack this further. If the board embraces this and moves it from superintendent's concept to Board of Education concept, then it goes to our friends on the town side. They will do the same thing with Tom Robinson going, yep, we have that money there in the budget. Do you want to use it to offset your costs for next year and go out with a lower percent increase by whatever amount that equals in the total amount of the budget, or keep it there, go out with a higher percent increase, explain to the community that we're moving now 456 out of a debt repayment calendar to capital improvements. If the Board of Selectmen likes the concept, Board of Education likes the concept, and you embrace it, then the voters get a crack at it, of course, in May. If the voters vote on that, then we have $456,000, and we'll be working with Fryer and Bob to design our year 1 of this plan.
Oh, I get you. That makes sense. Okay.
So there's really no action that we take as
No,
nothing.
I got you.
I think in what the action you might take someday soon would be a recommendation that includes this as a part of it. But I just wanted to get us thinking about secondary school. And then once we We have a vision on what we're gonna be doing at the secondary school. I think that now we can pivot back to the elementary schools. Understanding that also, if we do this, I know two of our board of selectmen sat here a few weeks ago and said, we can support anything you do that doesn't have an impact on the mill rate. Right? That's what they said. Now, I don't know if that's realistic or feasible, but I can say that was the nexus of my email to David Eisenfeld, where I said, hey, if I had $1,181,000 to pay off a bond, how much could I borrow? Understanding that, yes, that $1,181,000 is reflected in this year's mill rate. And by just reallocating it first to capital and then to a debt repayment cycle, you would have a cost neutral bonding referendum, which is an important political pitch to people who would be voting on this. But again, for $1,181,000, of course, we have to talk about how much can we borrow with that? Would it be a 20-year? Would it be a 30-year? What would we be using it for? And it also assumes that we decommission one elementary school.
So I think this brings us up to what we we're going to talk about in the last meeting, when we were going to go through all the numbers, and hopefully we will at some point be doing that. I believe those numbers started at like 28 million, and keep in mind, those were old numbers, and I understand they have to go up by 20% or whatever by the time we're done. And if we do choose to close a school, and I'm just going to keep throwing it out there because I have, but pretend it's Valley View off the list. I believe that's about 5 million off the 28. We're down to 23. I believe we just discussed potentially having 3 million of funding right now going over the next 3 years going towards those numbers, right?
Well, yeah, but you gotta,
That would put it
so
down.
the 28 million didn't include the rebuilding of 2 other schools. Now that's potentially in the game.
And that may not be in the game. It may be if the
You keep-
numbers work. But
Right,
for
but you
example,
have to keep one, and if it's not Valley View, that's the only number we had thrown at that. We have to develop numbers for the other ones. So let me throw out numbers for
that's
that.
if we renovate to new.
Correct.
If the mandate that this board was started as was
One occupied.
Oh,
Gildersleeve will need $8 to $10 million worth of work, which I have a proposal to talk about later, but it's, there's things to look at. You have money at Brownstone, you have money at Gildersleeve. The 28 million had really none of that included. It was restoration of Valley View to take the grades on. So now, if any of that changes, we have to look. We're either going to reduce the scope, keep Valley View, reduce the scope of that plan, and see if we can save the money in that 28 million, enough money to possibly get another school renovated with it, so we could still this is my thinking.
Mhm.
So we could still stay at that cap of about 30 million.
Which is maybe possible, since if we're moving 6th grade.
Right,
to-
so you can take a second floor off of Valley View and maybe reduce its space by rooms, but we would have to reach out for those numbers.
Can
if
I
that
just
was-
say something before we go any further?
Yeah.
absolutely.
We should probably close
Yeah, I'm
out
sorry.
what Charles was saying.
You're absolutely.
And because the next
Yeah.
next thing
You're
on here
absolutely
is
correct.
discussion of elementary
That's
facilities.
where we
all right?
wanna go
So
next.
before we go into that, does anybody have any questions on Charles's information that he gave us?
No, that was
Dr.
good.
Britt?
Just thank you, and thank you. That was helpful.
Yes,
It was
Thank-
very well
thank you both.
presented. Thank you.
yeah. Thank you
It goes
both.
away.
No questions. That
So-
makes sense.
We're good to move on to the next.
Thank you, Chair.
So, Bob, back to where you just were,
Yeah.
so they did give us a number, when you say reducing the scope, I think you were referring to the large school
Yeah.
at Valley View.
Exactly.
There's already in this packet, there's a number just to add on to Valley View, 14,560 square feet, to accommodate another grade. So that was in one of the proposals at some point.
To accommodate 2 grades.
Two grades. Thank you. And I believe that number, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that number was somewhere after our share would have been somewhere in the vicinity of 18 or 19 million at just that facility. Now, keep in mind, back to my point. So this is why we need to have a high level discussion pretty early on in this group, because we're going to be all over the place pretty quick. And we're going to need to rein this thing back in. We're going to need to get some parameters to figure out where to, and maybe it is one of our buildings does get a renovate to new, and The rest can just get repairs. Maybe it is, well, maybe we can't afford that. It's all repairs, get us through the next 20 years. And maybe we did everybody a favor by keeping the campus we closed so they can make the decision in 20 years. We have to figure out, the numbers are going to dictate a lot of this, in my opinion. I just think we should start diving into some numbers, figuring out where we are going and parameters of a dollar amount that we feel is appropriate, because I think that was one of the questions that was asked early on, us to come up with something we feel, because at the end of the day, what I would like to see is us to come up with a plan we all agree on and that we can get passed with the voters. Otherwise, it's a waste of time, just like the last couple committees. And I'm not being mean, but that's what happened. They didn't get passed, you know. So I want to get something we can work with that stuff.
Can I just add one thing, Ben? And I agree with you. Like we need to get numbers. We need to ask Friars. Friars here tonight, and I have a feeling Friars going to leave tonight with a homework assignment. Right? When we did this at the facility study committee, we were popcorning all these ideas. Mike was taking great notes and then going back to his shop, doing it, working his magic with his team and Bryce, and then coming back and educating us about percent reimbursement, renovate to new status, how we get renovate to new status, state reimbursement, all of these things. And we came up with 8 options. Some options had 8A, 8B, C. We did all of it. I see Bryce shaking his head, and we got to those numbers. And I think tonight, I'm hoping tonight that if there may be additional options based on this committee's asks for Friar, and that's why they're here. They're willing to take notes, go back, and then come back to us with the numbers. But I just want to throw out one thing, and I think it's important to kind of level set. The numbers are important. I agree with you. Probably the numbers are second only to what our kids need, right? Like, I think we need to first take a step back and ask ourselves, can we envision Portland in which ... You all took the position last time that 6th grade could go to the middle school. That means the facilities we're trying to develop a plan for and ask Friar to consider are for pre-K to 5, right? The question has to be about Brownstone first. The facility study committee talked a lot about this, and the facility study committee, not everyone, it was like, oh, a little squishiness, comfort level with 4th graders on Main Street, which is a tough place, with a Nordic spa going in that will only be increasing the traffic flow in an area that I have safety concerns, and our experiences in this town, I was up 3 weeks ago, illustrate. I have concerns about 4th graders at Brownstone. I have huge concerns about 3rd graders. And I, as your superintendent, am a hard no on 2nd graders at Brownstone. There are safer places for our youngest kiddos to be than Brownstone. So
I thought 2nd graders couldn't go at Brownstone due to it being, wasn't that stated last time?
They can if they're on the top floor, correct, Mike? And they're up there by themselves, not competing with older kids to get down, right?
Yeah.
No.
And I don't believe that's even,
Yeah.
I don't believe that's even a thing. So if, for example, we only have 3 schools to discuss. So if we choose to close Valley View, we are then talking about a renovation to Brownstone and a renovation to Gildersleeve, or close Brownstone and renovate Valley View. The problem with that is then there's an addition. So at the end of the day, this is a pretty simple equation to discuss. At the end of the day, there's no scenario that you're proposing or us that would not have pre-K, K, 1st, 2nd at Gildersleeve, correct? Just so we're clear, if that was one of the buildings.
right, but then you're talking about 3rd grade at Brownstone.
Correct.
Grade.
Yeah.
And that's my question for everybody.
Yeah.
And if you all say we're comfortable with grades 3, 4, 5 at Brownstone, then that's what we can take a look at. I'm saying that the facility study committee took the position that 4th grade is our developmental appropriate comfort level with kiddos on Main Street, considering the other options. If you all are going to say, no, they were wrong, we're comfortable with 3rd graders, not just for a short-term interim period while we renovate to new and are super cautious with them, but for the next generation of children who aren't even born yet, with 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders at Brownstone, okay, let's start looking at the numbers and how much that would cost. But I think you have to ask yourself as a committee, because I know the facility study committee asks yourself, are you comfortable with pre-K, K1, 2 at Gildersleeve? I'm sure the answer is yes to that. I know the answer is yes to that at Valley View, because that's what it was. Are you comfortable then with grade 3, 4, 5 at Brownstone? That's the most important question you have to answer now before you even start looking at numbers, because why look at numbers if you're not comfortable with your third graders on Main Street at Brownstone with a Nordic Spa going in?
I think it's pretty clear the previous committees got it wrong. I think that's a safe statement. The taxpayers were very clear on a 60-40. So I don't know what they got wrong. And what I don't want to see is I've seen a lot of, hey, the brownstone, especially from you, Dr. Britt. Let's close it, let's close it. That's it. You've literally, you've made it multiple meetings now, and you've made it clear that's your position. So, and we brought up parking, we brought up all sorts of stuff. So I went and I started counting all the parking stalls at all of our schools, and I started checking all the usable square footage and what site is the best site, what site is flat, what site is level. Are there certain things at the brownstone that could be better? Maybe the side road needs to be a one-way. Sure, maybe there's a few other things, but there is so many things that you cannot quantify. And there's so many Portland residents that made it clear in their vote. And I have a feeling it has something to do with that building. It is one of the most beautiful buildings on our school or on our main road. It's one of the most beautiful buildings in our town/county. I think we're fortunate to have it. I think we're in a position that it's 93 years old and could use some work. I think we could make it an incredible facility. I'm not saying that is going to be the one we keep open, but I would like to say, let's stop saying that needs to be the one to close. When Valley View has way more problems with the site, it is not level. It was a stretch to put in everything they were going to do there. There's a multitude of reasons that it's on a hill. So for snowstorms, Main Street's flat. It's easier to get in and out of. We could go with the pros and cons on every school, and we could go back and forth for hours, and there's no point in that. At the end of the day, the brownstone is a very large, beautiful building that I believe has the potential to make it another 100 years.
And Ben, let me just interject in terms of what my feelings. I supported the facility study recommendation that Gildersleeve be decommissioned, Valley View be turned into a pre-K 3 school, and Brownstone be grades 4, 5, 6. And it was in the room at this table when they said fourth grade is really our comfort level with Brownstone. Never third grade for a long term. Definitely never second, first, kindergarten, or pre-K. I'm just sharing this. So in terms of what I want, hey, if you guys said pre-K 3 Valley View or pre-K 3 Gildersleeve and 4, 5, 6, we retract our idea of moving the 6th grade up, but keep the 6th grade at Brownstone and put grades 4, 5, 6. Developmentally, I was there. I was like, ooh, yes, those kids are young. They run fast. We got to really keep an eye on them. We put some fencing around the building. We can make it work. But when you start
Maybe make the cage a little bigger.
right,
maybe
but
hook
when
it
you
to the
start,
school.
I'm just saying that, and there's teachers here, you should hear from them. When you start talking about third graders who elope on a busy street with that parent pickup and the tragedies, the accidents, the things I've seen in front of that building, I'm not making this up, ask Bob. People, it's there. Is that where you want your third graders? And I think before you talk about numbers, you have to hear from the people who work with third graders all day. Is that the best place for third grade? I know the facilities study committee position on that was no. We're okay with 4th, we're okay with 5th and 6th. Obviously, that's what we have now. Although even that, you should see the pickup there at the end of the day.
And I believe the points you're bringing up are excellent, and they should be brought up. But I do believe this entire thing has to be looked at in its totality. And at the end of the day, we are going to have to present something to the residents of Portland. And when I say residents of Portland, I'm referring to the parents like myself. I think I have the most kids in the Portland school system. And then I'm going all the way up to the retired people that live in the 55 and older communities. We have to come up with something that is going to pass. We can all sit here and say what we think is great, but at the end of the day, it has to work for this community. And I mean all aspects of the community, not just this little group here that we're going to all put our 2 cents in. And I want this to pass at the end. If we think we're going to come up with a proposal that involves a 15,000 square foot addition, I think this thing's dead on arrival. That's my gut. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I do believe the numbers have spoken. The number of 33 million was slapped back in everybody's face. So here we are. Is this the second or third go around with these committees? And I volunteered to get on this because I felt, and I hope everybody else is the same thing, that we can make a difference. And I want to get this over the finish line. I don't want to create problems, but I do want to have something that we can work with that does work for the children. I think that is so important. But equally important is, does it work for all the taxpayers? And we have to balance that where we can get something, and for the teachers and everybody in the facility. I believe we need air conditioning. We could go on, and I can't wait to go through that list. So then you guys will see that I'm not trying to not make a good facility or a great, I can't wait for the 100-year ribbon cutting if we keep that school. But at the end of the day, we need to come up with something that's balanced. We have to stop going by what previous committees did because they failed. We have to be open-minded and try to create something.
I'll just add one thing and then I'll just stop
Yep,
with
go.
that. Your idea of closing Valley means third graders end up at Brownstone.
Yes,
Are you comfortable with that?
100%.
So I just
You're
wanted to,
from these guys.
just to interject, one, I wanted to just to hopefully refocus. I agree with Ben, actually, on I think not on everything, but I do think that the vote failing had a lot to do with Brownstone and the way the vote was presented to the town. I don't know if it was all about money. We were tasked to talk to our neighbors and talk to people this week, and I don't, every single person who either voted yes or no told me something different. I don't know. Honestly, I thought that I would have some sort of notes that I'd be like, oh yeah, most people had this opinion. It would be like Ben keeps saying it's all about money. I thought but it was, literally every person told me something different. So I don't know. But one of the things that was pretty consistent was they liked the small school feel. So the mega school signs were pretty effective. And the other thing was the emotional connection to Brownstone. Not that people all felt like it had to stay, but that they didn't know what would happen to it. The idea that it is historical, is beautiful, and they have the emotional connection. I don't have that. Haven't been in town forever, but I sort of like rational, like if it is the biggest headache for the teachers and the school system and the parents, I'm not as emotional, but I get that. I do get that. So to your point, I completely agree. And I would not want my third grader there. Sean was killed a block from there on that street a month ago. I would not want my kid going to that school. So a fourth grade, I would struggle, but third grade, I would not want to. I mean, what am I going to do if we decide that, and I would suck it up, but I would not want, my son's going to be in third grade next year. I would really hate my son going there. I hate having to deal with it on Saturday mornings when we're playing flag football and trying to park there and walk across the street and not get hit by a car to walk to flag football practice. So I can't imagine what you're all going through with the parking situation. So that's my opinion on it. But I do agree with you that whatever we decide, that is going to be absolutely critical to how it's presented, whether it stays open or closed. I don't know. I'm not smart enough for this. I'm trying to figure it out with you. But the third grade thing is really, I would struggle as a parent.
And I agree with a lot of the things you just said about how to make it safer there. And I have a ton of things that I've thought about for the Brownstone to make it safer. If we were to put third grade there needs to be a bunch of parameters put in place. It wouldn't be a through traffic anymore. I've got a bunch of ideas. There's a separate bus lane. And I did go back and check, because you brought up stormwater.
Yeah.
We removed enough asphalt from the play area that we now could put that back and don't need to increase the stormwater, so that we have a way around that.
It's where we drop.
Say that again?
It's where we push new stormwater,
Correct. So
not onto other property, which now is
Cor-
the own.
no, but when you take out impervious surface that we already had,
Yeah.
and we did,
Correct.
we get that credit.
Percentages.
So for the bus lane on the side of the building to make it safer, if we were to go that route, there's a lot of things that have to occur to make it safer. I don't,
Yeah,
in a
percentage
perfect
of the
world, we
date.
should buy the property behind it, in time, but if that was to be the school we do keep, I do believe.
But like
there's
I
ways
said,
to make it very safe. We should.
Everything is money. So we have a conceptual plan 5 years ago to renovate Brownstone at about 7 million, 8 million.
Yep.
Okay, the highest one out of them all. And we know that because of age. That's inherent in the building, that certain things can't be done, certain things can be done, just the way the building was built. But adding a lot of other safety features and loops and stuff, we'll have to look at that, and that's gonna have to be something we're gonna have to get some hard numbers. Like I said, we don't have hard numbers like we did for Valley View. We had estimates 5 years ago on renovations of schools. So we're gonna need to turn those. So we need to decide which school. That's where I get to. We need to decide that up front before we do anything.
Well,
Really,
can I say-
really do.
Can I say,
You're the chairman, you can always say something.
Yeah.
I put this in here to, I think in fairness to this entire project, we have to look at every single. Get a plan for every single building. This is just a thought, okay? I've sat in his seat before. And run it by them. And say, what works with this? Put numbers with this, put numbers with that. The numbers may dictate everything to us. Maybe it comes out equal. Then we're put into this decision to say, just for an example, okay, Gildersleeve and Brownstone are the same amount of money or close enough. Then I think we do that battle. This is just my recommendation would be that we have to dissect each one of these buildings and put numbers to it. Then, because we can have this argument back and forth forever. And I think numbers are gonna, am I making sense in saying that, Mike?
I literally just did a simplified version of executive, simplified numbers. Want to hear
We do.
No.
right on the note.
But Mike, would you mind coming to the podium so that folks online can hear you?
Just identify yourself, Mike, as your,
Mike Serrano, President, Fryer Architecture. So I'm gonna round off and simplify the numbers so that we're all kind of running on the same page. So we've got 700 students, 7 grades, 700 students, pre-K through 5, that we're trying to put into renovated space, new space, safe space, that meets your 9 criteria. So essentially, if you were to break it up pre-KK 1 and 2 in one school, that's a school of 400 students. And you go grades 3, 4, 5, that's a school of 300 students. That's your 700 students. In general, the state reimburses 125 square foot per student. So of the school of 400 students times 125 square feet, you're gonna have a 50,000 square feet of space that we need to renovate for those students. 50,000. For the 300 student school times 125, it's 37.5, 37,500 square feet of space for those students. In total, it rounding up 88,000 square feet of space that we need to renovate in town to get all 700 of those students into safe renovated space. Fresh air, that meets the 9 points there. So 88,000 square feet is where the last committee landed. And in general, renovated new price is $750 a square foot. Now, that's exactly what you're talking about now is the 750 could be, based if we scope it out, 750 could be 900, and 750 could be 500. But for the sake of the argument, we're going to use $750 a square foot because that's basically where they're landing right now, renovated steps. So that makes it a $66 million project. Doesn't matter if it's at Brownstone, doesn't matter if it's at Gildersleeve, it doesn't matter if it's at Valley View. It's $66 million to get those 700 students into renovated space. So where the numbers change now is in scoping out that work. Well, does one of those schools not need a full HVAC upgrade? Is one of those schools too big and oversized, which was what you guys ran into 20 years ago, which was the problem with Brownstone. Brownstone, you can't cut it up to make it 50,000 square feet. You just can't. That's why we were trying to pull pieces off of that building and turn it over to the town. Because if you try to renovate, you've got existing buildings that we're trying to fit into a shoebox of 88,000 square feet. You've got right now 125,000, 130,000 square feet of space. Got to reduce that because it's not reimbursable above the thousand square feet. So that's where the mathematical argument starts to play out in your choice. So you've got your 9 points of education, and you've got the 88,000 square feet that we need to renovate. So maybe it's not full renovate, maybe it's some alterations, maybe it's in some cases, new space is cheaper, because the whole back half of Brownstone isn't appropriate for school, and it puts you into a big category of non-reimbursable space, you know, the theater and all that backspace and all of that is if you try to renovate that building, you're gonna be spending more than your 50%, or you're gonna get it way less than your 50% back from the state. Was how that whole thing played out. So keep in mind, so now it's a really simple thing. Where are we going to place that 88,000 square feet? Or how are we gonna readjust it? That goes right to your point of it. On the mathematics, it's 88,000 square feet of space that needs to be renovated or altered to get to meet your ed spec.
While you're up there, how many square feet is Valley View?
42.
42,000?
Mhm.
How many square feet Village?
It's 46,
46. How many square feet Brownstone?
76.
And that includes the auditorium?
We lost about 38 when we took the portables down about.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you for doing that, because I did not have those numbers.
Well,
Does this, so space to renovate these actual buildings, doesn't need necessarily like out of the space, like you were mentioning that the back half of the speed. This factor into that.
Yeah, so the 750 is kind of going down the middle. I have some cases where you have a perfectly good exterior envelope and parking and fields and stuff like that. And we're just focused on the interior of the building, and we're adjusting space for curriculum. And then we're putting in new indoor air quality and accessibility improvements, bringing in new lighting, energy efficient stuff. That may be 750. If you go to a building that's loaded with asbestos, loaded with PCBs, sitting on swampland, it's going to be $1,200 a square feet. And if you got a building that's pretty close to what you need for curriculum, and we just need paint, wallpaper, and new flooring, that could be $400 a square feet a foot. So that's kind of
So this. can
what you
ebb
have
and
to,
flow. Okay.
so when we go through these exercises, we have to kind of have an ed spec in place saying that this is the quality of the space we want to have. This is the number of classrooms we want to have. This is how big they have to be. They need to meet accessibility. We get that parameter, then we can apply it to the individual space and say, well, this one's going to be $500 a square foot, and this one's going to be $900 a square foot. The reason I'm using 750 is because that's an average, and I'm kind of trying to balance it for you to make the bigger 30,000 foot view of this, to have the discussion where you want to have them, and then we can apply more specifics to it, because some of your buildings are not in good shape. I mean, we got to replace all the glass, we got to replace the caulking, we got to mitigate hazardous materials, and in some cases, not so bad. So those all are factors in this discussion, which is exactly to your point. You have to make a decision. We can apply these numbers to them once you guys kind of have an idea of where you want this 700 students to go.
So I think Carl's thinking this, so I'm going to say it. Maybe if I'm wrong, I can't read his mind, but I think it would be very helpful. Is there any way you can narrow this down a little bit better per facility to give us an idea? Because you threw around a lot of numbers.
Yep.
What I would personally like to see in order to make this decision, and I if I'm speaking for everybody, speak up, and if I'm not, speak up. I think it's important that we know what we're doing and we know what things are going to cost. So for example, I do believe the Gildersleeve does need new windows.
Yep.
That renovation, I believe you mentioned saw cutting the floors out of it. I think we could get away with not doing that and maybe doing an epoxy on the floor. We have other options, but these are the things we're going to need to discuss to get
Correct.
these dollar amounts in check. Because we could be making a bad decision based on thinking it's gonna be $1,200 versus $400. I don't have a comfort level unless we did, and I don't know. So is there any way you can give us a better ballpark? Because I'll give you the example. You know the repairs that were identified at each facility at this point. And those were the major repairs. You got those lists, right? You went through them. Right.
His company has been through
Right.
every one of these facilities when I was
Exhaustive.
there.
Sounds
They-
great.
they
So next
basically
week, could you
did
give
the
us
same
the
thing.
numbers? So all I'm hearing is you do know what these facilities are gonna need to make them function for our children, whether it's Valley View, whether it's Gildersleeve, or whether it's Brownstone.
Correct.
What I would like to know, and I think everybody else in the room and in the town, in order to make this big of a decision, we need to know essentially, and I'm not gonna hold you to it, but I want you to come up pretty close about what each one of these is gonna cost us, period.
Yeah.
And then
so-
I want to know the
Yeah, of
percentage
course.
of reimbursement, for
Yeah, of
example.
course.
So, for example, if you say, hey, this school is much better, just do the major repairs, you're gonna get 50% on a
That's
couple of
exactly
big
why we're-
tickets, and you're not gonna get it here, but this school, you should do a renovate to new, and this is why.
Yeah.
I'd like to see the numbers, and I believe
course.
everybody else here with, how are we to make, I mean, this is a pretty important decision. I think you need to know that.
It
ASAP.
is, but safety.
Yep.
Has to be a priority in this. We all have. I think there's none of us that can disagree.
So
has.
stating that, and that was brought up a lot, the only school I'm aware of that doesn't have a double door scenario, we're not putting bulletproof glass in a new building, correct?
There is safety film being put on the first level glass.
On all of the,
It depends on the project, but yeah,
Usually, yeah.
yeah. So the man trap at the entrances is bulletproof, and then the rest of the glass usually gets a.
because for example, if we keep Gildersleeve, obviously that needs a double door scenario, it's missing one
Mhm.
that needs to be addressed. These are the things that
Of course.
we need to see. I want to know what we're lacking, to Carl's point, safety. I have no issue with safety. I think safety should be, and I'm hoping the state sees it as that essential.
They-
Also, it
they
has some
certainly do.
reimbursement component, and I would
Yep.
like to know that number.
Sure.
Because maybe we're gonna do more. These are the things that I need to know in order to make this big of a decision personally.
Yeah, so we did probably nine or 10 different scenarios that were they were pretty deep dives into, and they were pretty accurate to what the scope of the work was. As was mentioned in the first meeting that I attended here, well, the one that was dismissed was Gildersleeve because it had some substantial problems. So if I walk away tonight and you say, I want you to look at turning Gildersleeve into a 400 student pre-K through, give me that
Yeah.
assignment and we'll go through and so that's what you need to give to us.
I
so
think
that
you
we
need,
can
I think you need to look at Valley View as a K, pre-K, first and second. I think you need to look at Gildersleeve, and if I'm wrong, everybody just speak up. That's how this works. I think you need to look at Gildersleeve as a K, pre-K, K, 1 and 2. And then you also need to look at the scenario of Gildersleeve being the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and Brownstone being the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and let us start to discuss what we're up against.
Totally
I think
agree.
that's fair. Does that make sense?
You nailed it, because there
100%.
there are three possible combos, and I think
Right.
that.
Is there any
gets
other
at-
scenario I missed? I'm just
No,
trying,
that gets at-
let's,
that's-
yeah,
Yeah,
because these are big decisions.
And Brownstone
That's it.
as a 3, 4, 5, if people are comfortable. with
That was the
those.
second thing. I was saying. Yeah. Exactly. Just to see, because there may be something that we see that we just simply don't like.
That's it. Right.
And it may be Gildersleeve
And-
back to the shopping block in Brownstone because
Right. We don't know.
I think.
I think a lot of things are gonna depend on numbers.
Yes.
There's a lot of things with these facilities that I'm aware of that need to be done. I was aware of that they need to be done and those have to be addressed. Well, because that's gonna be big numbers. And I don't think any one of us here has a issue with any one of the 3 schools. It's just, but there is gonna be, if there is people that are uncomfortable, if the committee votes on that at some point and says, for an example, absolutely, we don't want to put 3rd grade at Brownstone per se, then I think we got to get there. But I think we got to go through the numbers. I believe are going to dictate a lot of things, but safety has to go with that.
And
That just might.
I want, and I agree with you 100% in safety. and the other thing I'd like to point out is if we do get to two great ideas, there is no shame
Right.
in putting that to referendum to bond. You know, Mike's now we can put both scenarios and let the residents decide. We can show what the cost is. No, we're not doing another survey. Jeez. I hear
Stop
that-
joking about that.
I hear that survey.
Stop that.
You know,
Yeah,
no,
more.
no survey. The survey will be the voters showing up and making a decision on what they want to do with their town, and I can get behind that, but
I think if that's the conclusion too, if one of these schools does end up needing to be decommissioned, what will be done with it needs to be clearly stated on there as well. I think, you know,
Yes.
there is this attachment to Brownstone and I won't hide it. My son loves it there. There's just something special and magical and feels like a big kid there. But I do agree that, you know, crossing that street is an issue. But you know, we could say that at Valley View for the kids they don't use that big field at all because they don't cross the parking lot. So there's a whole, it can go both ways. And there's no fence at Valley View to say we have runners by Main Street in third grade if we've moved it there. I personally have chased little ones at Valley View all the way to that road on High Street. And they run faster, trust me. So I just think if we choose which one we need to choose, I just think it needs to be very clear what will happen with that building because it is very hard to make a school not a school.
it might not be us, but she's spot on, and I'll tell you why. That was one of the fatal mistakes. This town wants to know what we're doing as a town. And if we can't come up with a scenario that is not only plausible, it has to be doable in the short term, they're not going to accept it. It's going to get shot down again. And what I don't want, I want us to come up with a great plan. And I'll go back to the example. If it was the Valley View, it's very easy to repurpose. If it's the Brownstone, we're going to repurpose, fine, but let's have that. And then there's a dollar amount associated with either one. One is going to be a hefty one. And you were right on whoever you spoke with. Most of the people I speak with could handle closing the Brownstone, but they never want it sold. They want it to be a town building and they understand it's going to be 10 to 15 million back onto the other side. So we're trying to come up with something that the town as a whole, to your point, what are we doing with the building? This has to be the whole number. So back to the only reason I keep saying Valley View, I lean to close that one at this point is because it is so small. It's the easiest to repurpose. We got Park and Rec would take the gym and maybe a few classrums. We got Oak Hill would probably take a few, what's that?
There's no gym in Valley View.
There is a gymnasium at Valley View.
No, there's a gymatorium.
It's a
Okay,
multi-purpose.
call it what you want.
Yeah, but
Park
not
and
a
Rec, hey, you know what it
There's no
is?
hoops.
Hey, guys, guess what it is?
There's no.
It's bigger than what Park and Rec currently have. Okay, let's be real.
Yeah.
So
And it's not.
my point is, it would be very easy to let Park and Rec use that, whatever you don't want to call it, gym. Yeah,
Yeah.
call it what you want. It's still a usable thing. It would be great for the town. It's easy to, if Oak Hill needs space after we do the consolidation, we can put them up there. Maybe they want more. Do they want more classrooms?
Yes,
Okay.
they would, Oak Hill has communicated they would take as many as we can give them.
And my point is Valley View is the smallest and easiest to repurpose. That's the only reason I lean. I have no, other than if we were to close Brownstone, boy, we better have a plan. And there's a dollar amount associated with it. Good luck getting this thing through because the residents aren't going to allow you just to close Brownstone and let it deteriorate like Central School. I think that's a pipe dream. I think we have to be real. We have to talk about these things. To your point, spot on. We have to say at the end of this, we've got to have a complete plan. It cannot be partial.
Yeah, and with that said, the land and building usages assessment committee that was put into place, which I think the report was probably one of the best ones I've ever seen come out of a committee in this town. It didn't have,
I know, and I found that shocking that they did not.
well, because they were working off of the original.
No, when I was on the Board of Education, we were always told if you had to close a school, it was Valley View, and I found it shocking. So what I learned
They
in
were working
time,
off the recommendation of the
exactly.
previous committee.
So who loaded the deck? Who stacked the deck? That's what you have to ask yourself. If it was the easiest school to close and it wasn't even considered, you have to ask yourself why. That's why I bring up, I thought it was excellent that Dr.
Previous
Britton
committee.
spent the previous meeting discussing the past. You know why? We can learn from the past. We need to learn from the past. We cannot make the same mistakes twice. That shocks me that it wasn't even considered. And I'm not saying we're gonna close that school, but boy, we're gonna at least consider it. I think this board's gonna talk about it. And so you
I
bring
just
up a good
mentioned
point.
that because we can't review back to.
I agree.
That's why I mentioned
Yeah.
we can't review back to it because we don't have any history from that committee on that school.
Can I ask Mike a question while you're at the podium? In addition to a financial picture of renovations for these new grade level configurations at the three schools, is it possible for you to give us a sense of, your perspective on the particular challenges of each site? Because, we can sit up here and talk about safety concerns at Biz, and I will be transparent that I have a lot of safety concerns about third and fourth graders on Main Street at Biz. But I know that there's particular site challenges there too with bus loops and safe parent pickup and drop off and crossing. So, we can kind of speculate, but would you be able to lay out for us particular concerns at each of these sites? Talk about the moisture at Gildersleeve, all of these things, so that we can kind of get more of a complete picture of the particular challenges at each site.
Sure, yeah. So the pricing and that exercise, I'm gonna need more than just the 1 week between. I hope you understand.
I was joking about the week. You said you were ready.
Yeah, but yeah, we can put together a package to get out to you that can be distributed so that you guys have discussion points. Certainly can do that. Yep.
Thank you.
Mike, could, and I'm not trying to push it,
Yep.
could 2 weeks give us anything, or you need more than that?
In an ideal world, 3 weeks, because I'm dealing with consultants here.
Yep.
So, and we are all in, everybody just completed, putting together their grants, and
Understood.
we're all running around like crazy, just like you. So 3 weeks, we could probably have a nice, spreadsheet of, pros and cons, and I assume you're gonna give me some homework, like you had suggested. I'm gonna get some homework tonight, on some scenario. Those 3 scenarios is what you want us to look at. And we'll just add it to what are we up to now? We on like 6?
Yeah.
Or do you want to, are we starting over?
Since we start.
Start over.
Yeah.
I don't even want to look at the other ones because they're not relevant.
They're old.
This is what we have in front of them. Right, they're not relevant. These are the only options we have, unless somebody has another option we haven't discussed. I think these are the options we have to deal with.
Yeah, I think Mike, what I heard, and Ben said it, I have to rewind, but I think what he said is how much would it cost to turn Valley View into a pre-K 2 and Gildersleeve into a 3-5? And how much would it cost to turn Gildersleeve into a pre-K 2 and Brownstone into a 3-5?
And how much would it cost to do Valley View as a pre-K 2 and Biz as a 3 through 5? So you gotta have each of those 3 scenarios.
Yeah. That
Combination.
makes kind of a take.
Right. So Mike, and then the other piece was, and maybe just spend a minute with it, because when we worked last time, I've learned a lot from you. I feel like I've had a sort of graduate seminar with you, and I know the answer to this, but folks here, Mike, what does it mean when the state considers your reimbursement and it's cheaper to renovate to new than build new, which gets you that general reconstruction rate, which in our case at Valley View was that 56%, that gold standard maximum amount of money you can get.
Right.
How does the state determine that, and how will that factor into, even now I know and I do too, because you've said it before, but maybe educate us a little on that.
Sure. So your current rate, I believe, is 51. Just over 50. So we're gonna use 50% just for this presentation, so I don't have to do math while I'm standing in front of everybody. So your reimbursement rate is 50% on all eligible costs. So that's where the different project types come to play. So a new building has a reimbursement rate of 40%, because it's 10% less. New construction is 10% less. I'm gonna circle back to that. Then a renovate is new is gonna be 50%, and an alterations project is gonna be 50%. I'm gonna leave it to just those 3 project types, because those are the relevant ones that we're talking about here for your schools. So for an alterations project, they're gonna reimburse you 50% of all eligible costs. The things that are ineligible, because it's easier to talk about what's ineligible, the things that are ineligible is going over the square footage. That's where you took the penalty 20 years ago. I'm building too big. The other for an alterations project, is things that are maintenance, things that should have been in your CIP for those 20 years that you didn't maintain. They're not going to pay for them they're not going to pay for replacing ceiling tiles and carpets and painting. They're not going to pay for any of that stuff. What they will pay for is accessibility issues, curriculum issues, improvements to technology. They'll pay for energy, indoor air quality, and building code violations that are the newer ones. So alterations project is got some select things that they will pay for. They're less expensive projects, but they come with a big weight around your neck. So you go and replace your HVAC system, but they're not going to pay for any labor to take the ceiling tiles down, replace the ceiling tiles, put the new ceiling tiles up, seismically brace everything, pull down. There's $40 a square foot worth of stuff up there that's not reimbursable when you replace your HVAC, and you're going to have to do it. So what ends up happening is it looks like it's a cheaper project, but your local share of costs is going to be the same as if it was renovated as new, because you're paying for a lot of stuff without the support of state money. So they put this project type called renovate as new in there so that all of that stuff could become reimbursable. And the weight they put on your shoulder for that is they want you to prove that it's less expensive to renovate as new than it would be to build a new school. So we do this whole study, bring it to the state and say, that school is not in that bad a shape. It's got good walls, it's got good foundation. The windows just need some updating, so to renovate that building as new, that's only $750 a square foot. And to build new is $950 a square foot. Therefore, it's cheaper to renovate as new. State gives us the status renovate as new. And that's how you proceed. So all of that stuff becomes reimbursable. Now, what the state also did, and they did that to encourage renovating older buildings and not replacing them with new buildings. What they also did, because so that sounds kind of like a no-brainer now. Now it's, all right, renovate is new. It should always be cheaper than building new, but that's not the case, because a lot of buildings built between 1925 and 1978 are loaded with very, very bad things that you can't work around. You have to remove them. They may be structurally unsound. There may be things happening underneath your roof. Steel's rotting away. So hazmat is a big deal for not qualifying for renovate as new, oversized buildings, and all the little hidden gems in 40 or 50-year-old buildings. So new construction, they will allow you to get new construction at the higher rate. So you would get 50% if one of our buildings cost more to renovate than it did to build a new one. It's possible one of your three schools fits into that category. You would have to do some invasive testing, but it's possible that one of your buildings would cost more to replace than it would be to renovate. And
It would cost more to
definition of
renovate than to
is new.
replace.
The very definition of renovate is new is everything in that building is to like new condition for 20 years. So you can't leave anything off the table. And that was circling back to Brownstone. Brownstone, everything in that building, contiguous building, would have to be brought up to 2025 building code standards to meet renovate as new, making it way more expensive than it would be to replace it.
No historic exceptions.
There's a historic exception of,
It's a good question.
because of the wide corridors you have, of it's like 20%.
They're only slightly over. They're actually
Yeah,
less than.
Anything built
Wide here.
things built pre-1950 get a little bit of extra money.
Mhm.
But it didn't match it. What we actually attempted to do was subdivide that building.
No, I know.
Yeah.
In order to make the square footage work, that's a
Yeah, it
math
has to be
equation.
so.
You got to take off the
Right.
auditorium, you got to take off the basements. There's
Right.
just no, and yeah, there's no
So
way.
that's kind of the rules on the three project types that are relevant to what. Now, there's other project types, like if you guys, when we start talking about the CIP work, there's a HVAC grant that we can go after. There's roofing grants we can go. There's little grants that are non-priority list grants that we could go after and tag money on. But the three that you're concerned with on this master plan is new, renovate is new, alterations. Be careful with I'll walk you through the alterations, alternatives, and so when you look at the initial CIP that was done for you by the Gordian Group, and you see that ours cost more than theirs. A lot of that was escalation just from the time difference, and a lot of that was that you couldn't look at those things as individual projects. It was you can't just replace 20-year-old HVAC units with new 20-year-old HVAC units that are inefficient and don't work. So we had to account for those kind of things that they didn't account for.
On the,
Very simple.
on the brownstone, now that you bring that up, how would they, what was the plan for obviously it needs air conditioning. Was it mini splits per room? What was the concept? Trying to figure out what they were doing,
I have to go back to the report and look at it.
just because air
Yeah.
quality is obviously better with mini splits.
Air quality was really bad in that building.
Yeah,
Sight-
with mini splits would be,
Sightlines? Those are 2 pipe compressors, just
that's what it was.
Yeah,
at about 1.2 million, 5 years.
we would have to be
There's
bringing
others
in,
options.
bringing in a lot of air.
Splits.
And I like splits because then we don't have
And we've looked at that.
40,000 duct cleaning.
Yeah, we've looked at
Well,
those
we
options
don't
too
do
and
it.
the prices, and those were in it.
Again, Mike just,
We don't do that because you could put the splits in, but you're
Right.
not gonna meet the Indoor Air Quality Act.
Correct.
You won't even come close. We have to pump in X amount of fresh air into that building. And then the energy code requires that air be tempered. So, similar to the project that you want to do at the middle school, high school, is you want to dehumidify any air that you're introducing into that system before it even gets into the system. And you don't want to bring in 100% outdoor air into that building, as some of these old systems would do. You just want to bring in enough to bring in the oxygen, squeeze the humidity out of it and temper it. So huge energy saving, would pay for the system over 20 times. So you've got the ceiling height in the brownstone. That's a good thing, but you got a lot of other things to trip over.
well, I don't know if we have the energy savings just because we currently, our AC bill's pretty cheap at the brownstone.
So-
Mike, can you also remind us, and I know Bob and Carl, we have the asbestos plans and it all mapped out. What is the status of hazardous materials at our buildings?
There is abatement required in all three projects. Abatement. Like I said, you guys are in a really good spot because you have swing space built in, because you're overbuilt by so much. The building, anytime you do abatement, the building has to be, anyone 18 and younger cannot be in that building during the abatement. So, the way that would work is, with any of these configurations is all grades are gonna swing to two buildings. That one gets abated. And then depending on how the sequence of construction goes, it could be partially occupied or just occupied all at once when the construction is done, which is, believe me, the way you want to go. But all of the buildings have at least asbestos inlay. And
Mike, you triggered my memory. We're also gonna need, fairly firm numbers for up here, the high school, middle school, because we have to do that also.
yes,
Well, and that was part
We
of the
just-
question too, was. If we do this and we talk about the secondary schools, but we won't be doing any improvements to all of these elementary schools, will that? Swing or adjust how much like that would be covered by reimbursement? Like, we don't touch Gildersleeve for 2 years. We don't do anything. Like you said, the ceiling tiles, we have to do all that, with the water pours through. Will that fluctuate? With the maintenance? With the maintenance. Does that make sense?
it's definitely a component of the overall budget of the project.
Right.
Your big savings in town that a lot of towns don't have is they spend a lot of money on swing space. So out of that $750 a square foot, if that happens in another district that doesn't have they're putting portables out in the courtyard of their school, and they're spending, $5 or $6 million on those portables to empty the building out to do the work. Or instead of doing a 12-month construction, they're doing a 24-month because they're doing multiple phases of that. So you get to move, you're probably gonna get, if you were to close down Valley View and do the work on that and move all the students to the other two schools, you would have zero operating costs on that building for the 24 months that it was under construction.
That's factored into the 725 number that I have.
Well, we'd still have the heat and electricity.
To a certain point, yes.
Yeah.
Depending on how it's
Right.
decommissioned.
Hey, that-
during-
Unless you're
That goes into
supplying.
general conditions of construction, that
Um,
gets turned over to the contractor.
yeah,
He takes over that building,
and I don't know if there's,
he or she.
so like at Gildersleeve, saw cutting the hallway floors out, if there's an alternative to things like that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you noticed, we have a serious situation here that.
Yeah.
Taxpayers only want us to spend
Sure.
X and we
Yep.
probably don't have enough and blah, blah, blah. So if you see things that, yeah, it'd be great to saw cut the floors, but for example, to stop the tiles from popping, maybe we just epoxy them. If that is a doable scenario, keep in mind, I'm looking at this as a 20-year fix to all of our facilities. And I do think we're gonna have another big problem in 20 years, let's be real. But let's try to get to the 20-year mark without any major problems, and that's what we're trying to address now. And then let the next committee worry about the next, and maybe they do build a new school at, whatever property or whatever.
No, you're right. There's topical solutions to the floor slab issue. So, and they're actually getting better and better and better. The first thing that happened with that is that the state in the Indoor Air Quality Act, which is what we're talking about, everyone thinks it's HVAC issues, but it's also off-gassing of materials that are used in the project. So all of a sudden, we couldn't use anything that was oil-based, right? And oil-based, there was a lot to be said about PCBs and a lot to be said about asbestos. And the same thing, there's a lot to be said about oil-based products, but they off-gas dangerous chemicals that the student can't be exposed to. Those exact chemicals are exactly what you want on your concrete slab to keep the moisture from coming up through the slab and popping your tiles. They have topical solutions now that are made, latex-based products. They're not the 50-year products that we used to be able to use, but they're 20 years and, the glues are all, latex-based glues and, they're not.
You had me
what
at
it used-
20. You had me at 20.
Right. They're not what they used to be, but there are solutions. And we would go through there so those things are $5-6 a square foot just to put that down after we abate the floor tiles. So you gotta go down, you gotta abate the floor tiles, you gotta shotcrete the floor. Then you have to float, and then you have to put the topical on. So we're right there, we're at, $16-18 a square foot. Place the slab is $22 a square foot. So what do you want to do?
Replacing the scab.
Right.
I think the last one you said was $100 a square foot was what you said in the last meeting. Cutting out the slabs?
Just throwing numbers at you.
No, I know, but now it's
Yeah,
20.
I will get you a precise number when
Yeah.
we get to the exercise.
My point is if there's things that it was more of a want than a need in this, I think,
Sure.
I think just start dialing it in now,
Mhm.
come up with something great. Let's analyze it and let's
Sure.
try to make these the best facilities we can for the money we have. Because boy, we got a balancing act to do on our end. So we appreciate everything though, Mike. Thank you.
And Mike, one more question. In this, bus loops, parking lot renovations.
Yeah.
Playscapes,
Fences.
fences.
I'll share some new stuff that I've received over the past 3 months with Mike. About
Okay,
those.
I'm just,
And Mike, can you also explain, like, just so everybody's aware, again, I know the answer to this, we've been down this road, but your numbers that you're gonna give us, get us in the ballpark. We really don't dial in on a number until we write an ed specs plan and present it to you. And then you use that ed specs plan to do a far deeper, more specific dive with Gilbane and the other folks.
That's
to do talk about your double blind budgeting, like how. I know, because I wrote 5 of them,
Yeah.
a lot of ed specs plans to get us out of this guesstimate area.
Right.
How close are the numbers you're gonna present us be to reality? And then what is the effect of an ed specs plan in terms of dialing in that number?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. So for the purposes of this committee, what we're trying to do is compare scenarios. So in comparing the scenarios, we're gonna give a square foot number to each one of them, and and how the reimbursement works, and in general, A versus B versus C. You make a decision on the weight of those things. This one is the cheapest, this one's the middle one, and this one's the most expensive, this one makes no sense. So we did those exercises, we did, 18 or so scenarios. Finally came up with one scenario that we actually brought back to the office, and we did a design so that we could give it to the construction managers to do a cost budget. It's not a cost estimate, because cost estimate is based on a set of documents that's 600 to 700 pages. And it's quantifiable. This is how many doorknobs I need, how many doors. So what we're gonna give you is not an estimate based on a quantified construction document. We're gonna give you a budget based on historic analysis, expertise. We just did one just like this over in Cromwell. That's how we do that here. So the first thing is the comparative analysis, and we'll use 750,000 square foot, but we also have to add, floor slabs over here. We have to add, we'll do those kind of changes. And then when you guys have us do a deep dive, we'll do a drawing, sit down with the construction managers and do a much deeper dive to get you a budget that you can bring to the voters, which then becomes the budget, which we then design to.
And maybe make just explain to everybody, and I know there's one online if you want to look at it. What is an ed specs plan and what is the real importance of that?
Yes, so an ed spec is one of the 15 or 20 documents that's required by the state to apply for the grants. And what the ed spec is it comes from the Board of Ed, and it is a description of the need that was found. Our schools are in really bad shape, and they don't meet code, they're unsafe. It tells the state what the need is, and it tells the state what you plan to do about it. So we're going to renovate this building as new. We're going to have 15 K classrooms, 12, pre-K classrooms. We're going to have a new playscape. We're going to have a new roof. We're going to bring everything up to building code and accessibility standards. Every class is going to have 15 computers. It's going to have Wi-Fi. It's going to meet the Indoor Air Quality Act. All of the requirements that the local Board of Education feels are required for your students to have the best education experience they can have. That ed spec is what we base the cost estimates on. That ed spec, every Board of Ed is different in every town, and they have different requirements for their students. And this is our best practice. We only want 15 kids in this classroom. We only want, per classroom, we want 20 in this one. So they're basically giving us the directions on what the building needs to be. That gets voted on by the Board of Ed, signed off by the Superintendent, Board of Education. That is what the building is based on. It is essentially a boilerplate that the state's been using since I've been doing this. It's find the need. This is how we're going to replace it. This meets our master plan for the district. Blah 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 blah. They don't differ very much from district to district unless you have a specialty curriculum, a magnet program, or a special ed programs or something like that. But generally, it's the same, and that is what we base the budget on, is that ed spec. And it's not a general, it's specific to a project. It's not a general document specific to your project.
And it includes the safety upgrades, the fire standards, the building, like it's pretty.
Yep, it's pretty involved. It's what, 60, 80 pages? Something like that. It's a big document.
Can you produce the historic number for reimbursement for the next meeting that the state, obviously, there's gotta be,
Yeah.
that would be one, but then, so basically.
It's online.
There's an extra historic renovation number that you could get.
Okay.
And so we're gonna call that Plan A that you're gonna come up with all these buildings. Plan B is obviously the repair list. And that's, if you're gonna need the 3 weeks to talk to the consultants and all that and come back with the numbers, that gives us, hopefully next meeting, we can start to break down potentially Plan B, going through the renovations, what's been done, what that 3 million potentially could take care of in the future. And what does that leave? And then I'd also want to know if we call that plan B, what out of that plan B is somewhat reimbursable, like we talked at the last meeting, certain HVAC, certain roof, especially if you upgrade the.
Secondary schools you're talking about.
No, I would talk everywhere because it doesn't matter, when you're doing.
Oh, you're talking about alterations to,
Yeah, I'm just saying the plan B, if we get down to a conundrum that the numbers just simply don't work and we're not gonna be able to make this palatable for the people of Portland, we're gonna have to go back to B, which I've been dying to go through these numbers that Carlos mentioned a few times. We're gonna eventually have to go through every single number that we have at every single facility, the deficiencies that have been identified over the next X amount of years and what it would entail to fix everything and bring everything up to code, including, and there's a ton of stuff on it, you know that. I'm hoping we come up with something feasible,
Yep.
I'm praying your numbers are great and maybe we're, numbers are gonna dictate everything, so. But what I'm getting at is, so if you're gonna be a few weeks getting all that,
Yeah.
I'd still like you to come.
are you looking at the Gordian report when you say that?
Yes.
You are.
Can I?
That's, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead, finish sentence.
Yeah, I just for the record, we reviewed that report and found it to be inaccurate.
Is that this one?
Yes.
Yep.
Sightlines is a Gordian, I say,
And
Yeah.
when you say inaccurate, you're saying some of the things just didn't simply entail everything, because once you open up X, there's sometimes other things that come along with it.
that is part of it, correct?
Yeah, and those are the things, that's why when we go line by line, like Carl said, I think we're gonna get to those
Sure.
issues, and I think then we can be more realistic. For example, I take you on your word. I think you're probably right in your statement that it's inaccurate by X. I don't know what X is.
Yep.
I just need to know, oh, okay. The HVAC was 500,000 on this paper. You simply think it's 550 because they missed this, or you think it's 1 million because these are the things I need to know
Yes, sir.
when we go to. And I'm not
understand.
sure that's the path I want to go down. I just simply
You want
want
to
to
do
have
this.
all this information in front of us. And I'm sure everybody else wants to know this, because we've got some big decisions to make.
Sure.
At the end of this, we have to do what's right for our community and the kids and the schools, and I'm praying, we get something very nice.
I'm sometimes the bearer of bad news, so
well-
that's kind of my. But one thing to keep in mind when you look at the Gordian report is, so you have to make the assumption that we can't just come in and replace a 25-year-old system or a 50-year-old system with another 50 years. Just right.
They don't
Well,
exist.
They don't exist, right? But the other part of the problem is with the building code now.
Yep.
It says that when you take on up, over 50% of the building is getting renovated, which is the HVAC system, immediately puts it into that category. Then everything in that building needs to come up to code. So just by virtue of that section of the building code, of what Gordian wrote, what Gordian's intention was for you to spread that out as a,
Is that his-
over
is that
20
his
or
name,
30
Gordian?
years.
No.
No.
Can I speak on that for a minute? When I was given the task by the Board of Education and then Dr. O'Reilly, it was to, let's have an evaluation of the building from the basement to the top of the chimney. Right? I went with Gordian because Gordian Sightlines is part of Gordian. Gordian does a lot of work for us without us going out, municipalities without us going out to bid. Okay, so we went through that and we identified all these things. Now, right as that thing began, we jumped into COVID. Okay. Am I correct in saying, Mike, after that, air quality standards changed? A lot of things happened that, maybe I'm wrong in
You're
saying that.
100% right. You're
A
100%.
lot of things happened between the start of that and where we are today, including costs. I was putting rooftop units on for $7,000, $10,000, $14,000. Just before I left, Bob inherited it. The air conditioning unit for the middle school, high school cafeteria, went kaput in like September. So we rode that out. That price jumped from like 14,000 to 30, 39. It was up there. And we couldn't get it.
Right.
And we couldn't, so things took and I'm not trying to say that I did what I was told. We were in a whole different world. We weren't getting into this Then we went this route, which was the absolute way to go. So his numbers reflect things like he's telling you. With this renovate as new is absolutely the way to go. Totally.
Yeah, and Gordian doesn't do,
No.
they're in New Jersey, they're out of.
Exactly.
And they were not, what they did was really, really good. It's really helpful for us to go through and scope it out, but they didn't understand the sequence and how things are reimbursed. They're not doing school construction like we do. So, we took that information, and put it into packages that were biddable and doable over the summertime, and, and then what the domino effect was of those projects, and that's, so I didn't just simply escalate it to $45 million. It was a thoughtful.
Yeah, so Mike, let me see if I can summarize it for you. I think, Ben, what you've been asking to do is take the sightlines report numbers and go line by line through. I think what I'm hearing these guys saying is that exercise would be futile.
I don't think it's real.
Well,
I think,
but
I think there's a good chance we're back to, so unless, okay, ready? So are you gonna be able to get this, south of 30 million total, all these projects? I don't see it. So the reality is we're gonna have to at some point discuss it, whether we like it or not. That's reality.
30
It doesn't-
million, your fee, your fair,
Yeah,
your part.
and including up here. Keep in mind, we've got two buildings we have, and I'm fine with renovate to new if the numbers work. I'm not against that. I need to see that. If you tell me renovate Gildersleeve is 12 million bucks, renovate to new, that might be the right number. It might be a good number. And, I'm saying our portion.
Yeah, I
That's what I need. We
I
can
think
sit here
you're,
and
I think
speculate.
we're in the range.
But to your point, we're not there
But
yet.
I think he said it's in the range, right? I mean,
That's right. So I don't think we should be making a decision because what if he's not?
well, I guess all I'm saying is that Gordian, it sounds to me like is outdated. It doesn't reflect current laws and air quality standards that aren't even in effect yet, but we have our eye on, right, Bob, and are very anxious about in the future. That if we were gonna go line by line through anything, the Gordian report at this point is kind of not the right one to look at.
Can I say something? John?
Oh, you're sure.
So the Gordian report identified everything. In a 1 to 3 year. Needed to be done, which we're way past that. 4 to 7 years. If I'm correct, 4 to 7 years, and then I think it was 8 and beyond.
Yeah.
So. That was gonna take us a long time to get there with our dime. Not talking about matching funds, 50%, 20% on whatever it was. We weren't even looking at that point. By doing it this way, we're getting a bigger bang for our buck. And I don't disagree that we can't look at what you're saying, but we're getting a much bigger bang for our buck. And ultimately, the taxpayer has to understand that we're better off. I mean, if we can pull this in within a number that is a net zero increase. That's what we were told.
I love that.
A net zero increase by members of the Board of Selectmen. Then I think we need to be, just my opinion personally, not as a chairman, just my opinion. We need to go down there.
And if that's what and I agree with you, Carl, well said. And if that is where we're gonna end up, and I don't know that yet, that's why I'm asking all these questions. If I had everything in front of me, I'd probably have half of my questions answered. But my point is, I do believe at some point we are gonna have to go line by line if we have to go down that road, because some of those things may not be needed. Some of those things may already be done. Bob's been doing a great job. I'm sure he plucked away at a few of these things I don't know how he did it, but he probably did a few. But my point is, and then if we have that other 3 million, I just want to be to Carl's statement. If that's what we're gonna give the taxpayer the best number, I want to be able to say, hey, look, we looked at the renovation and I can't make that statement. That's the reason and no other reason. The renovate to new may be the path but I need to see all this. That's all.
Yeah.
So I won't talk about.
And I think, I mean, if we had a meeting where that was explained, right, in a town meeting where that was explained with a PowerPoint presentation that By going this way, we're entitled to this. Yes, it's costing us a little bit more, whatever, but in the long term, we're not gonna revisit this thing. We're gonna get everything done now. Air quality to standards.
Right.
Safety issues to standards, school security to standards, our, air conditioning, you name it. It's all gonna be in parking lots replaced and renovated to fit that facility more properly. Bus loops addressed, everything. I had a very long conversation with somebody today about bus loops. You can all find out who that was.
You didn't do much talking, did you, Carl?
I did not. I asked a couple, my wife ran the buses here. for a while. So I asked a few questions today about certain things. So, no, just all.
Yeah, I think our numbers came out 45 million, of which, like 10 or 15% of it was reimbursable. So the cost to the town was almost the same as it was to do the full renovators new. But what you got for the $30 million was infinitely more with the renovators new versus the CIP. And it happens in the course of 2 years instead of 20 years. So, because you can't take, so there was a, but I will go through, I will go through that with you. So that,
Because even with the renovate to new, I'll give you one example. The renovate to new, well, no, that's a bad example because there, on one of the reports, it says we need a new elevator up on the high school side. Right over here, that elevator. That wouldn't be in what you're doing, but that was 150,000 identified or something to that effect. And I didn't know if it just needed a few new sensors or whatever, make sure it was up to code, as long as it's functioning and it's legal and it can be tied into our security system and our fire alarms and blah, blah, blah. So little details like that, when we go line by line, like the hood wrong school. So that's up here too. That was like $300,000. I was curious, put in the cafeteria for 300 grand, maybe we put some new screens in it, a new fan or something. I don't know. But those were the little details that I'm not trying to pick apart everything. I'm just trying to get a handle on it, just so we can make a good decision. That's all. It sounds like you're going to help us out and do a great job.
yeah, I mean, we could sit down, we'll bring a cost estimator in and go through the numbers with you to.
And keep in mind, when you're creating that last number, if there's anything on the fence that you think might put us at the 40-year mark and you can bring it down a substantial number to get us over the 20-year hurdle.
Well, you see, so. Yeah,
Those are the things we need pointed out. So we
I
can,
did, I did like a broad brush of, you need 88,000 square feet.
Yes.
So somewhere we need to find 88,000, not 92,000, not 96,000. We need to find 88,000 square feet. And then we can decide, how much work you want to do to that building to bring it up to the 9 point standard that is basically what the ed spec is all about, is for the school safety, student, the best practices of education. And and that may not be $750 a square foot in some of the buildings, it could be more. So that's really the exercise that we have to do, because I can tell you, we could do that to any of the buildings and make it beautiful, but one building is going to be $1,000 a square foot, and one is not. So that's really the exercise.
Can I ask a question? Because you talked earlier and did a nice job explaining the differences for the committee between renovate as new versus alteration versus building new. Can you just talk a little bit about the difference between alterations and a capital improvement plan, and maybe specifically what, I think we can envision what an alterations project or a renovate as new project would look like for our community. And you're talking about a 2 or 3 year timeline, and we would have the school projects completed and move forward. Can you talk about what capital improvements would look like for our community long-term, trying to make that happen in 2 elementary schools?
So we have to figure out,
And in the middle.
you're talking specifically CIP, not alterations.
Yeah, let's first of all talk about the difference between an alterations project and
Right,
capital
okay.
improvements, and then talk us through what capital improvements would look like, timeline, what the challenges and hurdles might be for us.
So pretty much if you're for an alterations project, say you decide that you want to add a special ed component, you're short on your special ed spaces and you want to add a special education component to one of your schools. The ed spec is gonna say, you need, the space needs to be code accessible, blah, blah, blah. So we have to imagine a car pulling up, letting a special ed student off. There has to be an accessible route to the space. Then we have to have the space itself, and that space needs to conform to all the requirements of new construction. The state pays for that because it's new curriculum or updated curriculum. To alter your existing building. So they'll pay for the alterations. So there's a lot of stuff that falls off the tree when you do an alterations project. It's like, all right, well, we gotta take out all the ceiling tiles so we can run the sprinkler line down to that space. And then we have to modify the electrical components, and we have to modify, so there's other things that come in there. If they're not directly related to that alterations, it doesn't get paid for. Otherwise, the state will pay for. So we're gonna alter one wing to make it special ed wing, and they'll pay for that as a project. Capital is really maintenance. Very, very different. So we have a rooftop unit that needs to be, it's got a 20-year warranty, and at the end of 20 years, it needs to be replaced. At the end of 20 years, replace that HVAC unit. That's a cap, and that money comes out of your capital accounts. It's a maintenance issue. So the capital projects are supposed to be maintenance issues. And what happens is that comes out 100% out of your pocket. And there are cases where the state reimburses some of those projects. So if you got an underground utility tank that needs to be removed, the state will partially pay for the underground storage tank to be removed and replaced. They will pay for window replacement. They'll pay for some of those things. If it's code related or energy related, and now HVAC since COVID, they'll do some HVAC improvements for you, which used to be capital, which are now a state project type. So you can go through and do those things, but any of the peripheral stuff around it doesn't get reimbursed. And so you have to have a substantial amount of money sitting in your coffers to pay for the ineligible costs of those type of things. So alterations are partial work. Anything related to new curriculum or modified curriculum or code update, building code updates or accessible paths, updating your bathrooms because you don't have an accessible stalls in your bathrooms. State will pay for all that stuff as an alteration. Renovate is new, it's everything. It's almost as if you're doing a brand new building.
So I think what I'm trying to get at, because I've had some conversations with Bob about this in the past, I'm trying to help. I'd like for our committee to kind of hear what it would look like if we were trying to tackle this at multiple elementary schools and the high school, middle school as capital improvements, as opposed to, like, I understand what you're saying. If we decide Gildersleeve is going to be a K2 school, a pre-K2 school, and we need to put in bathrooms for our youngest learners, that would count, that would be an alterations project because it's new curriculum. So we'd get some additional funding for it. But long-term for us, what's it gonna look like if we're trying to piecemeal capital improvement?
Well, it's an interesting question because of your situation here with your overbill. So normally capital improvement projects are done while school is occupied. There's gonna be some cases with a lot of the stuff in yours that are gonna have some abatement. It's like we're gonna do a security of the front door. The caulks are all gonna be hot. You're gonna have to get rid of all that's gonna come out as an abatement project. All that has to be done in the summer. So if you break down all of that capital work, how many summers is it going to take to do the work? So we did it like the 1 to 3, the 3 to 10, and the 10. We try to put escalation costs on those things. So if we're not going to get to the roof replacement, so year 7, we have to do 7 years of escalation on it, and that's going to have to happen in the summer. 7 years from now, you're going to do a separate design, you're going to hire an architect, you're going to do a design, you're going to apply for the grant, you're going to get your bids, you're going to do that roof replacement 7 years from now. 4 years from now, you're going to do your HVAC upgrade. So you're going to hire an engineer, you're going to do the design, you are going to wholesale replace an HVAC system in a building in one summer is almost impossible, as they're finding out right now. COVID kicked off all those HVAC projects, and they're going over the course of 6 years and they're just doing little partial areas of the building at a time, because you have to do the work. A lot of these buildings are occupied, so the only time to do the work is in the summertime. So every summer, you're gonna clear the building out, you're gonna come in there, you're gonna do a project. You're gonna reoccupy the building, now go on, and you'll pay escalation over the cost of time. And CIP, capital improvements are generally maintenance, so you're not doing upgrades to curriculum, lighting, those kind of things. It's just, we gotta replace the light bulbs in the fixture.
Yeah, and my question too is that to pay for that, if everybody throws up their hands and says, this is too much, we're just gonna do capital improvements in the town. In a town that doesn't have a great history of funding capital budgets, right? Would it make sense to go out for a bond in May for $30 million that you're not gonna spend some of it for 7 years to replace a roof?
Right.
Would that make sense?
No.
No, it would, right? I mean, you'd
I've
have
never
to
seen-
then be doing multiple bonding referendums over multiple years as you get closer to the projects, because those reflect the escalation of the costs.
The only time that I've even seen anything close to that wasn't CIP, but it was actually the master plan in South Windsor, where they did one school, they knew that they had to do 4 schools over there. They did 1 school, and then went out to referendum, did the 1 school. When it was done, they went out for 2, passed the referendum, they did those, and then they went and did the last one. So they broke it out. But I've never seen a CIP go to multiple bonding referendums before, but
So are you guys capable, if we have 3 buildings that need roofs, could you do all 3 roofs in the summer?
yes.
So I think that was a bad example. I've gone through the report of what we need.
Yeah.
You look very capable. I don't know you, but I believe you could handle most of this stuff in a timely manner. So I don't believe that's a fair path to start going down, that we couldn't handle doing these in a timely manner. I believe, once again. Well, I don't want to go back and forth. I like to know what we're dealing with.
Sure.
And how to get to the finish line. That's
Yeah.
it. You know what I mean? So if we need 3 roofs, I believe you could replace all 3 in the summer. And if you couldn't, well, I'd be shocked. Really.
Yeah.
And now that we're talking about it, and I said this in the first.
But you're saying doing that on a capital plan.
Right, that's just one of the options,
Yep.
correct? And don't forget, we talked about if we did some energy upgrade by foaming the roof and we're replacing the entire roof, we will get a reimbursement of some number, correct? We talked about this in the last one. So we have a lot of things to discuss, but I just want to be careful when we start making statements and going down a path that may,
Sure.
I'd like to see your numbers. I look forward to that. I think we could talk in circles all night. I think at some point we do need to just go through in case we end up on a capital scenario with something. Because at the end of the day, I would like to see this group come up with a great proposal that the town accepts and we can all move forward and we know what we're doing with every building and so on. And I pray it's renovate to do and, let's see what the numbers are. But if it's not, and it doesn't work, we have to make one renovate to do and do the repairs to the other. I need numbers, that's all. And I appreciate your time, Mike.
No problem.
Any further questions for Mike? Mike, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. When can we meet with you again?
Well, we were gonna come once a week. I just didn't have, I can't promise the deliverable to you for a few
Exactly.
weeks. until
So-
I got a lot of shows to move.
Right, so is it fair to say here as a committee, I mean, if he just works on his stuff and then comes back here in a few weeks,
The
we can meet on some other stuff, but we don't need to be.
I'd like him at least at one of them, only when we do the line items. What's reimbursable and what's not. He clearly knows his industry. He's gonna be able to quickly say, Ben, you're not getting a penny on that. That's a maintenance issue.
Yeah.
Move on.
I think I've
all right,
done that
so-
already, but I can do, yeah,
And
I can do that again. Yep.
well, we haven't done the line items yet, but
Yeah.
you may have.
No, I think I have
Oh.
a document somewhere that has.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
Yeah,
And then,
That's all I'll say.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So when do you want to do that? 2 weeks?
30th, the 30th.
Location.
Don't we need to?
Yeah.
We have an issue with
But that's okay, we
the
can talk.
schedule on the 16th. I think that's what you're trying to get at,
That's actually.
Part of it.
part of it.
Part.
30th.
So
Good deal.
2 weeks is the 23rd, right?
2 weeks is the 23rd.
That works for you?
Yeah, to do the line item, to do.
Yeah, and I'm not looking to waste time. I mean,
Understood.
half those line items say like renovating classroom to new. 46,000 bucks, whatever, move on. We're all set.
yeah.
I get what that means. You tell me what it entails on one, I know what
Yeah.
it means on all,
Yeah.
you know?
Okay.
I don't believe it's gonna be a big
Speed
deal.
back on again. It was a couple of years since we did that.
So,
Yeah, thank you.
so we do that on the 23rd. And then your second report on the 30th, or do you need to go into the first week of?
I'll give you an
February?
update on the 23rd.
Okay, that's fair.
Is that
That's
fair?
fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah, I'm gonna engage some cost estimators.
Okay.
And see what kind
Not
of
a problem.
availability they have, that they're really cranking right now, stuff, so. Oh, I'll see what I can pull out.
And thank you again, Mike.
My
Thank you.
pleasure, thank you,
You're
thank you
great.
guys for having us.
Okay, before we get to the public comment. Maybe I'm doing this in the wrong spot. I don't know necessarily that we need to meet next week. We have a conflict with this anyway.
Mhm.
And I don't know how you people feel. We can go around and see what you think about that. We're going to meet with Mike on the 23rd. 16th is potentially already an issue because the Board of Ed has another meeting. Should we meet that night, or should we just skip it and go to the 23rd? Get some of your questions together, what you want, people can look at stuff, or do you want to try and do that as a committee next week? It just said the meeting, lining this meeting up next week is gonna be a little bit tough, and it's also gonna be tough with probably, so.
We'll figure that out. We'll figure it.
So.
Okay.
So
Everybody
Yeah, we'll
wanna,
figure it.
we can go around the room here and everybody voice their opinion. How do you guys feel about that?
So on the 23rd, you're planning on doing the line item?
Yes, with Mike
So,
and,
Yep.
and, right?
So we have nothing technically at this point on the 16th. We haven't. I'm fine with that. My caveat would be, obviously, at some point, we may have to have 2 meetings a week towards the end
We-
of this
we
thing.
could-
If things
we
get, if we have nothing to discuss, I agree with.
Right.
We don't need a 16th. That was my point. But keep in mind, if, doing other committees, we may be
No,
doubling
no.
up towards the end.
We'll cross that bridge, I think, when we get there. We can go around. Does anybody else have any comments, any thoughts on that? Agree, disagree?
So I have no problem with that at all. I think what we should do is continue the homework of asking people in town what their feeling is about the school. I got the
Yep.
same thing that you did. It was just all across the board on which school they liked, why they didn't. So there was a lot of conflicting information. So I'll be asking everyone who can over the next week or two, what their feeling is, what their ideas are and suggestions. So I think that should be a solid continue.
Is everybody good with that?
Yeah.
All right, so we cancel next week's meeting. Charles, you good with that?
Yeah.
Okay, and then, I know you do, and we have a
It
conflict.
feels like it would be a very heavy day if we
And-
did both of those in the
You would be
same
very,
time. I'm all set.
so
We don't have so much bandwidth.
I would make a recommendation that we cancel the meeting on the 16th, I believe it is.
Yes.
16th. Okay,
Well, can I just make a motion? We cancel the 16th meeting?
Sure.
second to that,
I second that.
all those in
Jennifer
favor?
Davis.
Aye.
Okay, on that part. All right, so we're gonna do that. We're gonna meet with Mike and Bryce or one or the other on the 23rd, and then we will discuss where we're going from there. The other part of that. Okay, the next on the agenda is public comment. Any public comment?
Beth Anderson, 44 West Cotton Hill Road. I appreciate all the hard work you guys are putting in. I want to just remind you, keep your minds open to other possibilities. So I hear like the auditorium is this big space that you really can't get reimbursed for. Could it be cut in half and used partially as a music room, get rid of the chairs? What options are available for it? It's a safety hazard around Brownstone. Remember, you have fantastic parents and teachers. A lot of them can be trained for safer traffic flow. Do we really need 4 lanes of Main Street going by the Brownstone Intermediate School? It goes down to 2 lanes a half a block from there. Let's change the road configuration. I know that's not cheap, but let's keep some of those things in mind, please. Thank you.
Just name and address, please.
April Graves, Freestone Avenue. I just want to kind of piggyback off of what Beth said, actually. And I just want to say that, you know, there's thousands of schools across the country. They're on main streets, they're in inner cities, you know, Boston. So I just don't want you to cut it off the table right away just because they're young children. I mean, 2 of my children went to school in Hartford, pre-K through 2, right on Main Street in Hartford. There's all kinds of different safety features. You know, if that's gonna make a difference of millions of dollars or make it easier, I just, what I want us to do, we do keep our options open. Thank you for everything. It's been a wonderful discussion.
Thank you both.
Anybody else? How about, anybody on there got any questions? Okay, motion to adjourn?
We'll move it.
Can I make one other comment?
Yep.
So just quick announcement, with the results of the meeting last night, I need to come off the board. And we will, I'll meet at the next board of selectmen meeting and choose someone else to fill my place, but I will be here, ex officio.
Ex officio.
Thank you. I'm not even close, so close.
I like your spin on it.
I do like that.
You didn't take
Almost.
Latin?
I-
Should've gone to Notre Dame.
So that is in your court as the
Yeah.
board of selectmen, you do the appointment, there's
Absolutely.
nothing to do it.
And I'll send a recognition.
Okay.
But that'll happen. Again, I'll-
Okay,
No, you need the motion. I second it.
all those in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
So, thank you, we'll see you.
I need to go.
Ready to go.
23rd.
Mike and